Studying.
And we're live. Okay, so I'm Nat.
I'm James.
I'm Rob.
James, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, gee, what's there to tell? I'm a counsellor, and I'm from Corowa, and I'm sure there's a song in there about being a counsellor from Corowa, but I'd perhaps not burden the audience with my awesome singing ability.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I won't. So yeah, look, thanks very much for having me on tonight, and we'll have a bit of a chat about lots of things, all things, and looking forward to hear you, Nat, and hear you, Rob. Looking very much forward to that.
Okay, so James and I go back a while now. We both met at the Red Pill premiere here in Melbourne. To say it was an interesting night is an understatement.
That would have been 2016.
Yeah,
that
wow,
wasn't
that long ago.
Is it that long ago? You know, time.
5 years.
Yep.
Wow.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
that was an interesting night. It was a fun night. We met a lot of great people, Nat, didn't we? And
yeah.
And I'd like to think I saw a memory come up in my Facebook page the other day about it, and I did share it about some of the people I met and interviewed on that night. And I think, where are they now? What are they doing? And how much of a red pill did they swallow? Gee, it was a great night. It was a really good night.
It was because it was, by this time, Rob, we all sort of knew each other. I don't think James and I knew each other, but Rob and I had talked a couple of times, and we all sort of knew each other existed.
Mostly online.
Yeah, but that was the first night I actually got to meet people. And it's been since then, like everything else, like the education in this, it's been a snowball effect.
It was a first for a lot of things that night. You know, and it's always great to sort of shake hands with people and actually get to meet the people that you speak to and text with over the internet. And I think that's something that's sadly lacking with what we have today, is that sometimes COVID parked aside, is that inability to actually connect and sit beside each other and share a coffee, a tea, or perhaps even some other beverage. I think that's sadly lacking, and there should be more of it. More red pills.
And there will be again.
And
so yeah, that was
the red pill. But then there was the March for Men, and that's when James and Rob met.
That's right. So that was the March for Men in 2018. I just want to be clear about that red pill screening too. That was the inaugural screening in Australia. So there were 2 screenings in Melbourne before anyone else had a screening. We had the 3rd screening in Brisbane. And it was quite some time before there was one in Sydney. There was a lot of
that's right. It took a lot of doing, and it took I think I referred to it on the night as the day the pill stood still, when the Palais Theatre decided to recant on their acceptance of screening that, and that just caused chaos. And then the secondary location that we had planned, meeting that actually suspiciously was under construction with excavators and stuff like that parked all over it. It was a circus that I think a lot of people would find hard to believe, the actual trouble and difficulty in the logistical organisation that went behind that. It was quite a phenomenal thing, and most extraordinary that the damn thing got off the ground in the end.
And you're absolutely right. People really, if they listen to some of the stories we've had organising events, I think they wouldn't believe us. They wouldn't believe us. While we're on that subject, I just want to say, in Brisbane, we had the 3rd screening, and I contacted the Chanel Theatre, which is a movie theatre at the University of Queensland. And it was, I asked them, this was sort of around the time of your screening, and I asked them if we could get it screening up to, I think it was the end of 2015, and they said they were completely booked up to the last day. And then I said, well, what about 2016? And then they told me that they weren't taking bookings for 2016.
It was extraordinary. And I used to say, when we're having this online problems with it and the media backlash by certain very loud and small minority groups, have you seen any of the documentary? And the resounding answer was no, but I have a strong opinion against it.
Absolutely.
And right at that point in time is what we encounter, and this is possibly why we're here tonight, is that opposition in people's reluctance to accept anything that they haven't been totally spoon-fed, and I'm going to use the word indoctrinated against. Overcoming that, and I think, in some circles we call that a cognitive dissonance, changing people's perspective on something or giving them the opportunity to see a different point of view is quite a damn difficult thing. And certainly social media hasn't prepared a lot of people for that aspect. I've never been in an online argument on Facebook. I lied. But it's the norm, and what we struck back then is the same thing we strike back now. Is whenever you offer an opposing view of something that may be logical and it may be sensible or it might not be, the reluctance of anyone to actually accept that there is another point of view in this universe is quite strong.
And this is the point I make particularly because there are people out there who are our opponents, and one of the distinguishing characteristics is that we read their material and they don't read our material. What does that tell you?
I don't have to because I have an opinion.
That's right. I spend a considerable amount of time reading material I don't agree with. Okay, and that's how. So, but when they don't, and when I point them at things on, say, a Voice from Man, a site where I'm an editor, they'll say, "Oh, it's a site, so I'm not looking at it." Well, then they're not going to be challenged, are they? So, by all means, read it, criticize it if you want, but they're afraid to.
I think.
See, I'm too lazy. I watch YouTube all the time, but I do the same. I don't read their stuff. I watch their stuff on YouTube, but I sit there and I will yell at my computer and I'll abuse my computer and I will swear at my computer because it's like, no, that's not right. This is the actual facts. And then I'm going back, and I think I've sent Rob so many freaking YouTube links in the last week, and it's more to do with I'll send it to him, he'd come watch it, but it's got a place for me to go back and know where I've filed them away. And it's like, okay, so these are the facts. These YouTube clips are the facts on subjects that we want to talk about in the future.
No.
And it's like, this is what I want to scream at these people. It's like, you've got up until, I fell down the famous rabbit hole, and it was a few years before the Red Pill premiere. That just pushed me down. I walked around with blinders on because this is the way I thought feminism was. And I would quite proudly stand up and go, I am woman, hear me roar. Yes, of course I'm a feminist. And somewhat like Cassie J, when you start removing those blinders and when you start hearing the truth, it's not so much that I'm a men's rights activist. I'm just not a feminist. I just see that men's issues need help. And I've said all the way from the beginning, people out there that believe in the patriarchy and believe in feminism and everything are more likely to listen to a woman sometimes than they are to a man. So if a woman's standing up there going, hey, things aren't exactly how you think they are, then they might actually start to listen, and they still might not have to agree with it, but just listen.
Well, I think that is the point, isn't it? It's a shame it's got to this kind of stage where you need to be labelled just for having an opposing point, just for having an opinion that doesn't align with someone's narrative. You must be X, Y, and Z. You must be an MRA, or you must be a potato. Or no, I can't even say that, can I? No, I can, because I didn't say Mr. Potato. You must be this, that, the other thing. Instead of having some sort of verbal discourse about that, well, I must label you this, that, and the other thing. And I wonder if social media is more to blame for things like that than possibly what a lot of others accept. I mean, I digress a little bit here with this, but I think in my short space of time on this earth, I wouldn't dare say to someone some of the things people say online, because, gee whiz, I might have struck some, some contact counselling, as they call it, if I had been so rude as to label someone, call them all sorts of names under the sun, because I don't want to listen to their point of view. And I'm not saying what I grew up with was good in the respect of, have a bit of violence outside a pub or something like that to resolve an issue. I'm just saying is that I wouldn't necessarily say these things to people back then. Yet these days, people are so comfortable with calling me lots. I've been called them all. And I'm not sure. Yeah, social media is perhaps not for everyone, is it?
No, it is certainly part of the problem, and it's and certainly the online world more generally too. It's very easy to, when you're safe behind the computer, as you say, be going around throwing names around.
We've all been called them. I know. I've seen Nat cop it, and I've seen you cop it, Robert. And
I've been called alt-right, and to be clear, I'm not any sort of right. I never have been. I used to call myself left, okay, but I'm too disgusted.
Position on the keyboard? I don't know.
So I used to call myself left, but I'm too disgusted by what the left has become, so to do that anymore. But I'm certainly not right. These days, I like to say I don't identify on the left-right spectrum.
And that's okay to not identify, I think, at this point in time. However, that may change by the end of this.
So anyway, we were chatting about the March for Men as well, which was organised by Sydney Watson. Yep. So that was in 2018, and I apologise too. I think I said the wrong years before. Our screening of the Red Pill would have been early 2017. Yours in Melbourne would have been late 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, the March for Men was 2018, and that was absolutely fantastic. I flew down to Melbourne and spoke at the event. Absolutely great day. I've got a video. I've got a picture on my Facebook page. That's myself with Shani Randazzo and Sydney Watson in the photo. Behind us is a reporter, and behind the reporter is a line of police, and it really just encapsulated the entire day, I think.
Yeah, I've got one of me standing on the steps towards the station. And it's just, I walk down there and there is 80 police behind me. And I look like some sort of Blues Brothers outlaw behind it. I don't think a lot of people realise the police there weren't to, to stop us doing that. They would have stopped the counter-protesters.
That's right, exactly.
Protesting against potatoes being tomatoes. Of which most of them didn't even know why they were there against us to stop some sort of clash. And I think, I think that day was quite historical in a lot of ways, a lot of ways.
That's right. In fact, I want to make, regarding the police line too, there's a very clear way to see what their expectation was. If you look at all the photos, they're facing away from us. Right. And towards the protesters.
Absolutely.
So very clear which way they thought the threat was coming from.
Yeah.
Because where James and I were standing, it was like at the top of the stairs that went down to that street.
Yep.
And all the cops there was like 4 lines of cops right across the strip of these stairs that is actually very wide, and not one of them was facing us.
No,
that's right. Exactly. Yep. And I have to say too, I talked to a number of Victoria Police that day. The police were polite, professional, really had the situation under control. I think Victoria Police did very, very well that day.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I remember thanking them, and they said, "No, it's our pleasure." Like they were happy to be there to protect us.
Yeah. No, they did a very good job keeping the peace. It was great. Yes. So that was the march for me. That was also the same day that I met Natalie as well. So I've known Natalie online for a long time, and I recognised her actually. I didn't actually realise you'd be there, and then I saw you and walked over. We started talking.
Yeah, it's always the hair. People recognise the hair.
Yes. And we also met, as we mentioned last week, the Michael, the author of Marooned, was there that day as well. So it was great. As you say, it was a significant day. In fact, on one of the sites that I run, Wiki for Men, I've been taking a note of significant events and recording them, and the march is on there for posterity.
Yeah, no, look, awesome day.
So 2 quite memorable days where quite proudly and honoured for me that I met you 2 gentlemen.
It was lovely to get
friends. Like I do consider you friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were going to have a conference in Sydney in 2020, but that obviously got canned. But one day we will have our conference in Sydney. And then I think next I would like to have a conference in Melbourne, actually, which reminds me, I'm going to be running mini conferences, what we're calling mini comps, every 4 months, once sort of movement is free again around the country. Yeah. And Melbourne will be high on the agenda actually. So these will just be one-day events, but it'll be a good opportunity to sort of get together and meet some new people as well.
Rev it up, Robert. Get
Bring on the social justice warriors. Come on, I need a good fight.
Yeah. It's very interesting, actually. Melbourne is quite different. Queensland is a little more conservative as a state. I don't think it's probably a great surprise to anyone. We ran the conference in 2017 up here, and we didn't really have any problems on the ground. We did have a few people online complaining. Sydney, of course, there were problems, as we saw with the repel screening there, but I think Melbourne is where it's at.
Melbourne.
Yeah, but you got to understand, this is where I live. Do you know how bizarre it is to have my brain of thought in Melbourne?
In Melbourne, that's right. That's right.
Enemy number 1.
I've got to say about Melbourne, when I was trying to do the Marooned March and we got that bagpiper and things like that, had to go through an extraordinary amount of red tape, as in getting permits and getting permission and all sorts of things. And I had numerous conversations with the Victorian Police, and they were very concerned for our safety. And I said, how can anyone, take opposition to someone protesting about the suicide crisis in Australia? And I didn't use a gender, and I purposely didn't do that. And he said, James, it's Melbourne. Where have you been? I just thought,
that's great. That's great.
We were worried. We were warned, and my apologies if this offends any vegans watching the show, but we were warned by Victorian Police that the vegan protesters may take offence to it and use it as an opportunity to highlight certain inequalities they perceive to do with suicide. I'm not sure exactly what correlation that was.
No.
However, that's what poll told me. I still have the email about they're worried about a vegan incursion to our thing. I was just like,
well, probably a little topic, but I, on doctor's advice, I have cut down sugar and carbs because I was carrying a bit of weight, and since cutting out sugar and carbs about 12 weeks ago, I've been losing about a kilo a week. I've been eating quite meat and lots of veggies, and a bit off topic, but speaking of the vegan diet, I'm eating quite a lot of meat at the moment. It seems to be working for me. So,
look, I'm happy with it. I don't have a problem with anyone. Just I don't have a problem with. Yeah, no, I do have a problem with some people, but not vegans. No.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's fair. Exactly. This is true. Actually, if somebody wants to be a vegan, and in fact, I know some people who, for health reasons, choose that diet, and that's no problem at all. So.
Yeah, I just think the vegan supremacists, the ones that stand in front of the meat section at Coles and say, don't buy this. I'm not a big meat eater, but they're the days I want to walk into Coles and just buy it all up.
Like, to make a point.
What to eat. I'll eat it.
I'm going right out there now. I've got a joke for you all. How do you know if someone's a vegan?
They'll tell you.
Yeah, that's right. Don't worry. I'll say, sorry, I apologise to anyone that's vegan. Now, where were we?
There we go. Nice. There we go. The comment, get some pork on your fork from Chris Belmont. I like it.
Chris, well done. If we could only get our great Lambassador on the program, that might be the one, the great Sam. Yeah.
Is he still going? I thought he died.
Oh, absolutely. No. He's convalescing on a strict diet of lamb, and the prognosis is pretty good for him. Yeah. A little bit of mint in there too.
Of course.
Nice. That's always good. Yeah. So we were talking about Victoria before. Full disclosure, I'm actually Victorian born. I'm not sure that you guys know that. I left Victoria when I was quite young. But my family goes back in Victoria for about 7 generations. In fact, I'm wondering just how early. Some of them might have been there quite early with the founding of Melbourne. I don't know if they were at the founding, but some of them were there within a couple of decades, I think. Anyway, as a result, as a Victorian-born person, I'm quite shocked by what's been happening in Melbourne and quite upset about the direction of the state. Shocked and appalled. Exactly. That's right. That's right.
I didn't know that, Robin, and I'm not going to hold that against you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're from Victoria. I was born in New South Wales.
I have plenty of friends from New South Wales.
We won't hold it against you. See, I was born in England, so...
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was born in Liverpool.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
I've been here for 40, how old am I now? 42, 43 years.
Yeah, no hint of an accent. No hint of an
accent. I hope not.
And one topic we were going to mention tonight, and we've been talking about other things so much, is we were going to talk a bit about false accusations and things that have been going on recently. Been a false accusation. Excuse me. There's been an accusation against a government minister, and going about an event going back several decades. And I believe the police have closed the investigation already for lack of essentially evidence that could bring about a prosecution. So it's interesting the situation we find ourselves in at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to say that there are allegations levelled at that minister, which have not yet been given the opportunity to be presented, argued and tested in a court of law. And I think it's probably very important to realise the impact that social media has on an allegation. And in fact, if we don't even talk about that particular person at the centre of that allegation, and you look at others that have been the subject of media lynch mobs and I know we can mention John Jarrett. We can mention Craig McLaughlin. We can mention Jeffrey Rush. And possibly it's not appropriate to mention a few of the others that have had very serious allegations leveled at them, not via what would seem to me the appropriate method, via police and via any investigation that might come out of that allegation. But some people have chosen to go to the media to tell their story rather than tell police, and this perplexes me a little. I think if you look back in history, when we were burning people at the stake, and you made an allegation of Robert, you're a witch, let's burn you, and everyone in the village didn't like you, so we'll burn you. And whether you denied that or agreed with it, yes, okay, I'm a witch. Burn him, see, we told him. It's like an episode, and I'm reluctant to say this, it's as farcical as an episode of The Simpsons to have a situation where you can simply make an allegation to the media and you can be hung, drawn, and quartered, have your career destroyed, and everything else around you on the basis of that allegation. And I shouldn't need to put a caveat or any explanation on what I say. If the allegation is true, then I would expect that person to be prosecuted to win the full extent of the law. Not our law. Social media is not a law, and it shouldn't be, and for very good reason. There's a recent example of very high-ranking free-to-air television executive who was dragged through the courts after serious public allegations were made. He was relieved from his position, and then it turned out that the allegations could not be substantiated, and in fact they were recanted, which didn't result in any prosecution of the person making those allegations, yet it destroyed that man's career. It destroyed absolutely everything, and he has no possibility of gaining another job because those allegations are made. And we forget, if we're supposed to have a presumption of innocence until we're convicted by a jury of our peers in our system, we can't have lynch mobs running around doing this. By the same token, I do not want that to take away from any genuine victim. And we need to have that process in place where genuine victims are afforded the opportunity to have these matters heard in court. And although sometimes justice can't ever offer recompense of what has happened to someone, I guess that's our system that we have. Or are we heading back to a system where we should have public stonings?
In actual fact, false allegations harm genuine victims too. So you've got multiple people who are being wronged here. You've got those who are falsely accused, and also those who have been wronged legitimately, and they're genuine victims, and it makes it harder for them as well. So
that's the double point of that, Robert. You've got an alleged victim making an allegation, turning someone who they say is a perpetrator, when in actual fact, when they're proven to be false, is actually the real victim, and it's a reversal of the two there. It's quite complex. Right. It's quite complex unless you can get to the facts and you can ask questions and you can interrogate and do things that our lawmakers and our police are there to do. If you impede that process, then I can't. I think that's a very slippery slope to make an allegation and have that, and that brings me to the allegations that are made against another television executive, of which he was relieved from his contractual obligations to a particular or two particular shows without that matter being tested in court. So is Channel 7, and I can say that because that's public record, now judge, jury and executioner of all things? Is it up to them now to decide and administer an appropriate method of justice? And I think we can't and we shouldn't allow that.
Absolutely right. And this has become, I am concerned, and I think it's related possibly to the fact that we don't teach people anymore about the nature of our legal system. They used to call it civics. So that they used to actually teach people in school about why we have the presumption of innocence, why our system works the way it does, and they don't do that anymore. And I wonder if that's potentially part of the problem. People don't, when these things happen, they don't see why there's a problem, why this is a problem. They see the short-term benefit. Maybe they really believe that person's guilty and they're happy that they're being punished, but they don't see the bigger picture of the damage it's doing to our entire society.
I think the the history of Salem might have been wiped from the curriculum. Now that, and it disturbs me greatly because I see things from a different, I guess, from a different perspective. When and I'm going to cross over. Hopefully, that's okay to cross this over into family law.
Absolutely.
These allegations of things like that are primarily in the criminal jurisdiction, which are not often as closely adhered to in the family law court or federal circuit court or whatever we want to call it now that it's put together. It's still a mess, no matter which way you mash it up and put it together. Those things, perhaps we might see a change in the jurisdictional problems that we've had with allegation, prosecution, and outcome in a family law court that might be more closely aligned with what's going to go on there. I mean, I can only speculate, and so can everyone else that's not directly involved with the amalgamation of those two courts. And thank you, Anthony Albanese. The court didn't get abolished, you peanut. It got put together. Am I allowed to call Albanese a peanut on here?
You can call him whatever you want to.
I just want to clarify that because I didn't want to call him a peanut if he wasn't a peanut, and I think he's a peanut. So because I think he was on public record as saying that the court's been abolished. No, it hasn't, Anthony.
Yeah, that's right. It's been merged. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It's been amalgamated or joined together for whatever reason, and maybe that'll become apparent in the next 6 months. I think maybe those issues there are false allegations, which are rife in the family law court or whatever jurisdiction you want to call it. They are rife in that area. And I think some of the statistical analysis that's been put forward have said that there's 98% of family law court cases that have an allegation of domestic violence. Now, this allegation can't be totally dealt with in a family law court arena. It's a criminal matter, so it's dealt in criminal courts, and quite often the two don't talk to one another. So an allegation can be made and it has a completely detrimental effect on proceedings in the family law court. I'm hoping we get to a point there where we don't have, an allegation made by whoever wants to make that allegation, and I'm not being gendered here when I say that, because they do come from both genders, where that has a direct effect. And it's almost like it's like the social media thing, isn't it? You make an allegation in an affidavit, which is on the balance of probability correct in the family law court, when it's not tested. And tested, for those that don't know, is tried in evidence. I can say, Robert, I don't like you because you stole my car or did something. like that. You know, I loaned you $50 when we were in Melbourne for the March for Men. Do you remember that, Robert? No, you were drunk. You don't remember that. It's an allegation which you can choose to refute. But how can I say something like that that has a detrimental effect on you? It's just not cricket. It's not right. And I don't want to make light of it because it's costing people their lives. I'm hoping that in some magic parlor trick of this court amalgamation, we're going to get to a situation where these types of allegation are made as an allegation and then investigated, not parked over to the left or the right, while children's matters, and I think we briefly touched on what effect that can have in child custody matters. And that's why I say, you know, that these types of allegations are made in the family law court, and it's widely known and widely accepted that these are made quite regularly to gain an upper hand in a child custody dispute.
Yeah, some of the claims that seem to be made in the family courts are just absolutely extraordinary and wouldn't fly in any other court at all. But they've got that's why they seem to have a very different set of rules. Some of us are hopeful that with the merger, with the amalgamation, that situation may improve, but it really remains to be seen, doesn't it?
It does remain to be seen. Look, I wrote to the Attorney General a while ago about his thoughts on that, and I didn't expect a reply. I just did it, and I gave an analogy about a farmer having 2 paddocks with 10,000 sheep in each paddock, and then all of a sudden putting all the sheep in one paddock with the same back door and the same front door. How is that going to expedite proceedings? How is that going to make it more affordable? How is that going to end the never-ending dispute resolution merry-go-round that people go on? I didn't get a response out of that, and I didn't really expect one. And I think he's pretty busy doing other things at the moment to respond to that. I don't know. You know, I see something more in the joining of those courts. I mean, you know, we'll harken back to when those courts were separated. They were separated because of the overburdening problem that we had with immigration and other issues before the court. So it was thought that a specialist family court be set up, and it was staffed appropriately and accordingly. And then the Federal Circuit Court took over most of the proceedings, and the bulk of their proceedings are immigration issues. I can't see the immigration issues disappearing overnight, nor can I see the family law court issues disappearing overnight. And that brings me, and sorry if I'm tangenting off here a little bit.
No, that's right.
That brings me to the inquiry that Scott Morrison ordered into the family law court was due to be released on the 25th of February. That's now been put forward to, I think it's around June or July. They've released an interim report into that. There's a lot of hoo-ha going on in the background. Several groups have had their submissions heavily redacted when it was supposed to be an inquiry for the people, and it was an opportunity for people to tell their story without lawyers being involved. And sorry, my lawyer friends, I am highly critical of some of you in the family law court arena. I don't care. There you go, own it. And they've put that off, and I see that certain groups that have made submissions to the family law court inquiry have not had their submissions redacted.
Interesting.
Very interesting. There was a little thing the other day in Parliament about the possibility and upcoming legislation to be introduced on coercive control. And one of the organisations that had all their submissions redacted actually got a seat at that and got into quite a hefty argument with one of the people on the panel suggested that men actually can't be a victim of things like that. Can't be a victim of false allegations, can't be a victim of domestic violence, and therefore you're lying because they can't. That was a pretty interesting little video moment, and I'm pretty sure that organisation is going to release the whole lot of that video publicly in due course. And so they damn well should.
Yep.
That shouldn't be censored. If how can you hear one side and not the other? I just don't understand how that's allowed. Actually, no, I need to slap myself there. I do understand how that's allowed. It shouldn't be allowed. It's possibly more appropriate, more an appropriate thing for me to say.
Moreover, I was just going to say, when it comes to intimate partner violence too, a very high proportion of it is reciprocal, which means that both partners are both the perpetrator and the victim. The idea that you can separate this men's violence from women's violence just isn't true. If you really want to address the problem, you have to address the whole problem. And if anyone wants to challenge me or us on gendered violence, the evidence we have that intimate partner violence is not gendered is overwhelming. We publish it online regularly. If anyone wants to challenge me on that, I'm happy to point them to it. Domestic violence and intimate partner violence is not gendered. That's what the evidence shows. Anyway, please.
Yeah, it's so hard to get that across. I mean, I see Peanut Albanese went. I called him a peanut again. Sorry, I'm probably going to get in trouble for that, but I'm going to do it again. Has gone completely off the wall and drinking all the Kool-Aid in the world, and talking about men need to change their, we need to change this, we need to change that. And I did raise that issue about intimate partner violence in same-sex relationships, and I happen to be quite familiar with the statistic there, but I didn't quote it because I know if I quote anything, if I quoted the contents of a Kellogg's, cornflakes packet, it would be refuted by people who don't want to agree with that. How do we get around that? If you speak factually and you say, "Oh, listen, I love what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and I accept what you're saying." So if that's a given, could you perhaps accept what I'm saying? Here's this, and I'll spoon feed you on your personal secretary, and I'll quote every damn statistic in the country, and you either get blocked or you get called some name or something like that. How do we get around that, good people? I'm blocked.
So sometimes I hear people say, don't worry about facts don't worry about the data because it's emotional arguments and so forth. There's a term in mathematics. My degree is in mathematics. Necessary but not sufficient. In my view, it's necessary for us to detail the data and publish the data and so forth. That alone won't solve the problem, but we still need to do it. Some people argue we don't need to bother with that, but we absolutely need to get the data out there. But then there's more to it beyond that, unfortunately, because humans aren't always necessarily that logical. But absolutely, getting the data out there is the first step. And that's certainly what we've done, I think. But then we need to appeal to people. And I know Paul Elam is quite a well-known character in the men's rights movement, and he's a leader of the men's rights movement. But he really shocked people. Going back about 10 years. Paul's a friend of mine, by the way. Going back about 10 years, he really shocked people by publishing some articles that on the surface were absolutely outrageous. But in actual fact, if you dug down, you realized what he was saying, that he was actually making very good points, but he was doing it in a manner, he's a fantastic writer, he was doing it in a manner which got people's attention. So the data was there, but he had to take a step beyond that, got people to look so that they would then look at the data.
I wish I could be as articulate as him in getting people to actually interested into reading that like it is. Hi, Nick. Nick's put a comment up there. He's right about that.
Absolutely.
I was as articulate as Paul about that.
Yeah.
Really,
Paul's a fantastic guy, a friend of mine, and I can tell now he has accepted our offer to appear on the show. So we'll be having him in a future episode.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll have a girly fan moment. So it'd be like,
It's nothing. I've got the same thing happening, Nat. Don't worry about that.
Paul is a lovely guy, and he takes a lot of hate for the work that he did. And but he did what needed to be done. He got people talking about the issues. He got people looking. So then then people like myself who are sort of more down the line, facts focused, can then jump in and run with it after that. Once he got people.
We've got some really interesting people appearing on a lot of people's social media pages at the moment. I didn't get their permission to mention them, so I won't at this stage. But there's a fellow in Sydney who is just bang onto this, and he's extremely vocal, very articulate, a great writer. And whenever someone says, a particular, or someone will, it's usually relating to Albanese's off the charts comments lately. I don't know who's writing his Facebook page. I did write to him. Perhaps I won't hear back about that one too. This guy is bang on to it, and all of a sudden he's attacked personally, and he doesn't ever retaliate about that. He's not once fallen for the bait and retaliated. He's just put fact after fact after fact. And I admire the guy so much, because sometimes I might not be that, I might not have that ability to control myself in that kind of thing. But this guy, bang, 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 he's onto it. I think he should be on your show.
Yeah, so it's because I know a fair number of people in Australia who are active, and I wonder if I know him. After the show, we'll have a chat about it. And
I get his permission to use his name, so perhaps we couldn't. So.
Yeah, afterwards, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Great guy. I've not met him personally, and I'm looking forward to doing so. I was trying to hook up with him with that coercive control. A little dialogue that happened, but that didn't happen. Where do we go from here? What were we talking about? Child custody. That's a great.
So something I actually wanted to touch base on. Now, I've got a 22-year-old son that I raised by myself, and it wasn't anything against his dad. His dad was in the Navy, so he was gone for months on end.
Yep.
So he would literally only see his son every twice a year for a few weeks. And it wasn't, he was a great dad. He did everything right. And so I'm not in the position to say, it should have been 50-50. The circumstances were different for the three of us. But raising a child needs a father and a mother. I was lucky enough that I had good male role models in my son's life. My brother-in-law was a big part of helping raise my son. That's what I wanted. I wanted positive male role models, because I had this boy that, if he fell over, I was still like, oh, put a Band-Aid on and I'll kiss it better. Instead of like saying, toughen up, have some concrete. I wasn't the type of person to play football with him.
I can't
to talk about, because I know a lot of people, and especially men, are going through situations now where it's not a matter of even fighting for custody. And I hate the word visitation rights, because
it's a terrible word, isn't it?
They are fighting just to see their child on a regular basis.
Thanks for sharing that part of your story, Nat, about that. And I think that in the past, it's been overcomplicated, this particular area of these terribly cold words that we use, visitation, child custody, care and control. And I think that sort of sterilizes the emotional aspect a little bit about that. Perhaps that's by design. I think in my early days, if I can start by saying that, I had a particular point of view that I thought there should be, perhaps a base point of, let's say, for example, a 50-50, a mandatory base point. I've somewhat changed my opinion about that, but that requires a little, detailed explanation. And speaking, I am not a lawyer, and I guess anything that I say here perhaps should be run past a lawyer with a practicing certificate. When I talk about, things pertaining to the Family Law Court, and in particular a section of the Family Law Court Act called 60cc, which is, in reference to child custody, but I have to backtrack that a little bit and say that it's often the most misinterpreted, misunderstood piece of that act ever to be included after the Howard government tried to get a 50-50 mandatory standpoint in there. What it means in the Family Law Court, and thankfully most parents don't involve the Family Law Court with their child care arrangements. Most of them don't. It's somewhere around 23% of divorces, I believe, that end up in the Family Law Court doing that, and then they become subject to 60cc. The court's consideration is not about time spent exactly with either parent. The court's consideration, first and foremost, primarily, is about parental responsibility, and this is where the confusion came in. Parental responsibility is often confused with time spent with a child. It's not. It's got nothing to do with it at all. That was watered down to the court's finding of substantial and significant and meaning time. And I'll defy anyone on this face of the earth who can stand in front of me and say that an every second weekend standard mad dad arrangement is substantial, significant, or meaning. Bull. It isn't. It can't be. And I think to challenge that, that's going to take a lot more than what we've been able to do in the past, and hopefully that might change in the future. The real scenario is you have a bust up, you have what we call a default custodian of the children, and quite often that establishes who has custody, care, and control of that child. It would normally be I'm trying to do this as non-gendered as I can, but I can't, because these are the facts. That's the way it is, and bugger it, I can't sugarcoat it like that. Most of the time, the dad's left home, been kicked out of home, might have been an AVO or something like that, and that sets off a process of default custodianship, and that's taken over into the Family Law Court. We don't have a right. As I say, as parents, you don't have a right to see your children. It's your children have a right to see you, have a meaningful relationship with that. I just, for goodness sake, if anyone's listening out there, if I can say one thing to you, if you're about to bust up, don't go to the Family Law Court. Sort the stuff out yourself. Don't do it to your children. Don't spend all your money on lawyers who, there's one of my sayings, and anyone can borrow this, it's not copyrighted, is that the courts act in the best interest of the child. What they don't tell you is that's the lawyer's child, not your child, because little Timmy needs a new BMW and he needs to go to private school or a debating team or something like that. Don't do it, people. Stay the hell out of the Family Law Court, because it's going to destroy both of you. And I think, how do you wind that back to a situation where you're not going to have lawyers involved? And I guess under some circumstances where you've got terrible instances of domestic violence, then you might have to bring a third party in to make some sort of determination on who the child should spend time with. But the other consideration, and I've always had an issue with the an allegation in a criminal court, and then you head over to the family law court. There is a particular issue about family violence that's taken into consideration with the children. Now, it's a given if you're having a marriage bust up, you've probably had one or two harsh words. Would you agree? You've probably not said to each other, I'm not sending you flowers next week, see you later, I'm moving out. You've probably had a bit of a disagreement. And if that disagreement then is to be interpreted as family violence, because everything is family violence, not speaking, everything is, that gets crossed over into the court there. Doesn't mean that either of those parents will exhibit family violence to the children. Was that just between the parents? The kids might have seen that or something like that. The courts fail in that to understand the differentiation between, having a break up or, bust up, whatever you want to call it. Does that actually result, or should that reflect in time spent with a child? It shouldn't. It just shouldn't. Unless, well, Nick's just said it there, the paramount duty isn't even considered unless the lawyers are getting paid. And he's absolutely right about that. And hello to all my lawyer friends out there. I guess I won't be getting a Christmas card of a few, but what are you going to do? It saddens me that, being involved with a lot of dads groups and things like that. And in fact, when I started there, that we got up to about 14,000 people. It was every day we were having dads not able to cope with this anymore, and making a choice to not be around anymore. And I think even our current Prime Minister, when he announced the family law court inquiry, he said, it's costing people their lives. And he did actually say on national television, which blew me away, I fell off my chair, that he thought around some 30 of the 50 to 55 men per week that we lose that aren't able to cope with things anymore have child custody issues, family law court issues, financial issues, and things like that. And I understand that what I'm saying may be quite disturbing to some people watching that. And I guess, I can give you the standard line of Ring Lifeline if you want to. That's easy to look up. It's 131113. If you want to do that, best bet is to contact a friend, have a chat to a friend too. If anything I've said is upsetting you tonight, please do that. I'm going to spin off your tangent here. If I can say this, is that one thing that's really, really, grinding my gears lately is that any organisation that says you've got a problem with something, just call Lifeline, it'll be all right. As if that's some sort of magic panacea cure to all things. It's not. It will help some people, and in fact, I know of certain people that have called them and had a great experience with that kind of thing. I suggest to any male who's watching this and not having a good time with that, do not call Men's Line. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. You're not going to have a good experience. Trust me on that. Send me a PM or send Robert a PM or Nat, and we'll tell you what happens with these organisations that you call. Don't call 1-800-RESPECT either, because you're going to have a worse experience. The best thing is to contact a friend, and I think that's what we should be doing more of, and rather than consulting other things and whatnot, particularly when dads get in these custody issues, you find yourself pretty devoid of a lot of things. And, you find yourself at the mercy of some of the lawyers, of which have the bedside manner of Dr. Kevorkian, and they won't explain to you the processes that are going on. It's very hard to understand. You're not living in your former matrimonial home. You're living on a couch, can't see your children. You haven't got any money. And all these things are buzzing around in your head due to these custody laws that we have at the moment. And I think if our government wants to get damn serious about this, and I'll have a shot at you now, instead of calling Albanese a peanut, I'll have a shot at you now, Morrison. You want to set up a national suicide commissioner, yet you embargo them from investigating into the family law court. What's up with that, Scott? You want a national children's commissioner. I'm going to have a crack at you now, Megan Mitchell. Geez, I've got a long list of people to have a crack at, haven't I? Who was the National Children's Commissioner, who was embargoed from investigating anything to do with the family law court. What's up with that?
Yeah.
What's up with that? Are we seriously doing something about this crisis? And, when I say it's affecting men, of course it's affecting men, but it's affecting their children, and it's affecting, they might have repartnered, it's affecting our mothers, it's affecting our sisters. The whole damn thing needs to be tipped on its head. I hate to think how much Megan Mitchell, the Australian National Men and Children's Commissioner, got paid to release that 385-page report that said that we should be more in line with UN actions. Good on you, Megan. Here's a flash for you. A huge majority of children, I think it's 2.5 million or something like that, are directly affected by the family law court. Why couldn't you look into that? Why couldn't Christine look into our national suicide advisor, commissioner, or what? I don't know what they call her. Mrs. Potato Head, perhaps, would be more appropriate. Why isn't she allowed to look into those organisations? Wonder why.
Yes, I could take a guess. There's a lot of money involved. a lot of people who are powerful, unfortunately.
Am I sounding like some mad conspiracy theorist here? It's a fact, people. What I've said to you is exactly right. The National Children's Commissioner, Megan Mitchell, cannot investigate family law court matters. Look it up. And also our National Suicide Coordinator, who was directly to advise Scott Morrison on the crisis that wasn't a crisis, but it's 3 times the national road toll, can't look into the family law court. I wonder why.
There was a Queensland study on suicides in the state completed a couple of years ago. I mentioned in a previous episode, and they looked into what was causing suicides. And for men, they absolutely established relationship breakup was a major driver of men taking their own lives. Unfortunately, they didn't dig any further. I think if they had, what they would have found was it was really the parental alienation and them being denied access to their own children. They left it at relationships. Good they got that far. They really should have gone further, and they would have seen it was actually men not being able to see their kids. As a father, I'm a father. I don't talk about my personal life by design publicly very much. I am a father. I have a good relationship with my child, and I'm very fortunate that I've never had to experience those things personally. I couldn't imagine how I would respond if I couldn't see my own child. I couldn't.
Yeah, well, it's such a test of one's own character when these, and speaking as a counsellor, when these sort of things happen to people. And you think, most guys I speak to when they enter the family law court, they think that it's okay, I've got a lawyer, justice will be served. I've done nothing wrong here. What can possibly go wrong? The truth is on my side. this will be fine. And when they quickly discover that the truth and justice does not live in the family law court, that's a tipping point for most guys, and that happens usually within the first 6 months of being engaged, usually as a respondent into proceedings of the family law court. And I think there's there's a duty of care of the system there to have had some sort of intervention into guys and mums, because this does happen both ways. I'm going to get shot down for not saying that, because it does happen both ways. I think that there should be some intervention done there, and maybe the pilot programs that are running in Sydney that don't involve lawyers. There's been two pilot programs running at Parramatta Court, where you've got mediators and a couple of senior lawyers and things like that, investigating, who should live who with what, and looking at court's primary consideration of who can do what, with what, how, and why. Do you have the means to look after a child? Are you going to provide a stable and non-violent environment? Can you facilitate the education of that child? All the normal things that intact families are supposed to do, but they don't do all the time, do they? Those pilot programs may be the way forward. I'm not sure how much of a tokenistic thing that might well be. I don't know. I see the instigator of that was Professor Patrick Parkinson, who used to be the Dean of Law at Sydney University, no longer there. But those two programs are still actually running. Don't know. There's also this other program, this other Lighthouse program now, where again you've got where an allegation precludes you from participation in those pilot programs. So again, they can be thwarted, and it's like the mediation thing we have here. You're not supposed to be able to enter the family law court arena without what's called a 60I certificate, a certificate of mediation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you turn up at our beloved Relationships Australia, because we love that organisation so much, they're so friendly towards all genders and totally unbiased and loving of their employees, you turn up to one of those, and during the intake, if you say, look, there's been a bit of violence, there's been a bit of yelling, which is so uncommon in a bust-up, isn't it? Nobody yells at one another in a bust-up. Then you're automatically given a 60I certificate to proceed without mediation to the family law court. Now, I'm sorry, I think there's ways of getting to people in two separate places to discuss this without having to spend on average $80,000 per person. Again, the Howard government set these agencies up with the view that they would be your one-stop shop to take the pressure off the family law courts back in those days. That's why he set up what was his proposal of 50-50 shared parenting, which doesn't fit everyone. I know that. People, don't yell at me about that. Don't send me filthy PM saying, it doesn't work. It might be the fact that we have to have a baseline that we need to start from and work from there. Because, look, I know if I was an interstate truck driver away for 14 or 18 days every 2 weeks, I couldn't possibly have 50-50, could I? I just couldn't. So it's unworkable. But if I was a stay-at-home, let's say, for example, boat repairer, and my ex worked as an interstate truck driver, then perhaps I could. So I think we need that opportunity. We need to make it clearer that shouldn't cost your children's, your matrimonial home or your children's inheritance or anything like that, to establish that kind of thing. So maybe we do need a baseline. Maybe we do.
It's a good starting point, though, the 50-50.
It should be a starting point, Yeah.
It's like if you start off at 50-50,
yep,
and then you sort of go, okay, so this isn't, a national truck driver, so we'll give it 40%. But they go away on business trips every 6 months, so we'll take them to 45%. But when they are home, they're home for 4 weeks, so we'll bring that back up to 45%. Somewhere along the line, you've got to start right in the middle and then deduct back.
Absolutely, Nat. You've got to have an opportunity where, anyone can say, well, look, I can do this. I'm willing to take a lesser job because I want to be with little Tommy and Tilly. I want to do these kind of things. And I see this happening all the time where people might reassess their their focus when it comes to things like that, and the realization, look, if I don't do this, I'm going to miss the boat here. Family dynamics have changed a little bit. No, not a little bit. They've changed a lot, haven't they? I think we don't often have that one parent income family anymore. We have two parents working, where those children are more than likely in some sort of daycare facility. And when those bust-ups occur out of those ones, I see those children still in a daycare facility when one parent has the absolute ability, and every other thing that the courts want to establish as a requirement, but they're not given that opportunity. And I think maybe that is where you need that standpoint there, and then we talk it out and we say, look, I'm nicking off here. Exactly what you said, Nat. Exactly what you said. I can do this, or I can't do this. I want to nick off and go and work in the mines as a fly in, fly out worker. Well, you can't have 50-50, matey, if you want to do that. You just can't. Priorities.
Start on an equal playing field,
yeah.
And then when you walk into these situations, if it's going to court, the judge should have in his head, right, this is 50-50, and then we'll start playing with the times. Like, it was different for me and my son's father because he was in the Navy. So I never stopped. Whenever his dad said, Natalie, I want him, I was like, yeah, you've got him. Took him out of school. The school understood. The school knew the situation, so they didn't even begrudge it. It was always, yep, go. There was even one time where he was in Iraq, and I was living up in Coffs Harbour at the time. And when he was coming, he said when he came back, he was going to come up and pick him up. And I said, yeah, not a problem. And I got in contact with my ex's mum and said, I want to surprise him. I'll bring Brock down to Sydney. If you can pick him up in Sydney when you're going to meet your son at the dock, just to surprise him, just to give him those extra couple of days with his son.
Wow.
That's how it didn't matter the relationship between me and his dad. It could have been horrible. We could have insulted the crap out of each other, but he was his dad.
See, how do we get you across to everyone else, Nat? And just
what you're doing there, Nat? You're adulting.
Oh, yeah.
Don't say that. I've got a reputation to keep up. But
how do we get parents to put aside the issues that they've got with each other and realise that they've brought this precious people into the world, and that's what actually bloody matters here, and not the fact that I hate you anymore or don't, or whatever. We had a child together. What are we going to do? How do you do that? And the answer is not through lawyers. The answer is not through that. And thank goodness most people sort that stuff out like you did, Nat, without the interventionist ideal of the family law court, because it just won't help things.
The amount of times I was, like him and I would have an argument throughout text. And the amount of times some social justice warrior, I'll put it that way, would say that's abuse. And I'd be like, we're actually arguing with each other. Like, I'm given as good as I'm taken. You can't blame it all on him. I'm calling him every name underneath the sun the same way he's calling me every name underneath the sun. It was never in front of our son. I always made sure he was protected from that.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter our relationship. He was a good dad. And we spoke about it last week about when I was in my dark place. He took him for 2 years. He raised him from 16 to 18. And it was all done behind closed doors. I didn't know about it until my son was gone. And I sent him to see his dad for Christmas. At the time, I was angry that it was all done cloak and dagger. But now I understand why, because mentally I wasn't in the right frame of mind. And if they hadn't, I mightn't have gotten better. If they hadn't done this cloak and dagger stuff, I might not have gotten better. So he helped raise his son for 2 years. Like, he was a full-time dad, and I got to see him every 6 months for 2 years. It was only because I wasn't the right person. I wasn't the right parent. At the time, I didn't know it because I was in such a dark place.
Gee.
Yeah, it's what you do. You do what's right for your kid. You don't do what's right for you. That's ridiculous.
Why can't we get more? Again, thank you for sharing that, Nat. That's pretty awesome. That would have been a very hard time.
But it helped me. Like, it did. If I still had to continue to be a mum, when I was in that dark place, I could barely feed myself, let alone look after a young teen that was really, and I really didn't give a shit.
And it's really great that his dad, your son's dad, could be there and step in.
Yeah. He took him. As I said, it was all done behind my back, and my son went up there for Christmas, and then he called me and said, I don't want to come home. I'm staying with Dad. I was upset at the time. I was angry, and I was angry for a couple of years. But it wasn't until I started to dig myself out of the dark hole that I realized what they did wasn't just the best thing for him. It was the best thing for me. Because I couldn't have gone at it.
I wonder, that's an awesome outcome. I wonder how many people, I certainly wouldn't advocate for people to go and, to perhaps, take children off the other parent and do these kind of things. I mean, it's worked out in what's happened for you, but what do we do when we've got situations that clearly one parent is not coping at all and that child is suffering, when you don't have the remedy available of a court to do something? I mean, the last thing we need is people to go taking things into their own, taking the law into their own hands. So I'm not sure what we do with that, Nat. I don't know.
It was fortunate that it was very fortunate that it did work out for me. Please, in no way, form of anybody who's listening, do what happened.
Yeah.
But you've also got to understand that we touched base with it last week, is I've come out so far on top. So is my son. He's actually home at the moment. But he's usually down on Phillip Island working. He's just come home for his weekend. He's striving. I'm striving. His father's striving. It was the best thing for us.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was fortunate enough that I have this amazing sister that helped me through my dark place. And she helped me with Brock when she could. She was all these positive things in my life that I couldn't see. But again, I'm not condoning it. It just worked out for me.
No, I understand. I understand, and I just wonder, because the remedy isn't there in the family law court for children once they get, around the age of 14, the court's extremely reluctant to intervene into what's going on. So you've got, kids, because they say, oh, look, we can instigate what's called an 11F report, and the child can basically decide where they want to live. And I think things, horses already bolted by that stage, hasn't it? There's already been a high conflict situation. There's already problems that are happening. And I'm just not sure how you address that to begin with, because it's a lot of cart before the horse. I mean, the conflict is probably emanated, if you're in the family law court system, it's probably emanated at the start of it. That's been the catalyst for ongoing conflict and things like that. I'll say again, thank goodness most people can work this stuff out on their own without ending up in the bloody family law court. Thank goodness they can, because it's a mess. It is a bigger mess than it was. It's the biggest mess it's ever been at the moment. COVID has certainly compacted and compounded issues like I've never seen. And I don't see any end to that at the moment. The family law court system is in absolute crisis. And, if any lawyer wants to ring me up tomorrow, my number's on my Facebook page, tell me it's not in crisis then, and I'll tell you don't work in that system, because it bloody is. It's a damn mess.
The more people that find out what I do outside of my everyday job, find out that I do this, not just the show, but support men's rights and support men's issues, the more people are starting to come to me saying, Natalie, can you help me with this situation? And the more I'm hearing of fathers fighting just to see the kids, we're not talking about custody, we're not even talking about 50-50. And I will never use the word visitation rights. They're just fighting to see their kids.
Yeah.
That's all they want. They just want to see the kids. There's no better feeling. Like, the three of us, okay, not you two, but James and I will catch up and we'll have a big hug, and it's great to catch up, and we're mates and that hug feels great. But there's no better hug than that one from your kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true, Nat. Very true. And I could only hope and pray that out of this family law court inquiry, that some of the recommendations are actually taken on board, and it's not like treated like the last family law court inquiry, which was done by lawyers, and they made, there was a hard 66 or 67 recommendations out of that, and every single one of those was to do with increasing funding. And the only reason you increase funding in that organisation is to lengthen the duration of the cases. It just doesn't work any other way. I wonder what's going to happen about that. I campaigned and sold my soul to a particular politician a while ago to get that inquiry off the ground, and I'll happily admit that. And now that it's underway, I mean, they went after, the Greens went after her, and in particular 4 members of that current inquiry panel went after Pauline Hanson, saying she was there. She was biased because she'd been through the family law court system herself. Her 2 sons had been through the system. So therefore, how can she sit on a panel when she's bloody biased? Well, about a quarter of the way through the system, one of the panelists, my favourite favourite MP, Graham Parrott. Sorry, I called him a parrot. It's Parrott. Yeah. My mistake. Sorry, Mr. Parrott. Put forward a private members bill to stop the family law court's consideration of equal shared parental responsibility. Now, I'll ask you this. How can someone who's on a panel to hear on an inquiry for the family law court system that hasn't concluded, hasn't heard all the submissions, put forward a private members bill to do with the family law court? So I petitioned the secretariat of the family law court panel, and I started several petitions which magically get removed. It's extraordinary how that happens. And anyway, the secretariat wrote back to me and said, "Oh, look, Mr. Parrott can and is free to put forward any private members bill, like most of them are, and most of the private members bills go in the garbage bin anyway." But I thought, here he was accused, Pauline Hanson, of bias, clear bias, and having an agenda. Yet he goes and introduces a bill like that.
Yeah.
So you wonder, with the likes of him and the Chook lady on there as well, how's it ever going to come out? She's as mad as a meat axe, that one. And, there's Muddy Waters and a cohort that up your way, Robert, that, run a very, very powerful domestic legal advice service.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get their submissions redacted. How has it got any hope for dads? And I personally know a lot of fathers were pinning way too much hope on the outcome of the family law court inquiry. And it does scare me if we don't get some sort of positive change out of that. It does scare me of what might happen over that.
So we've actually run well over time. We normally try to stick to an hour, nearly an hour and a half. Why don't we get you back on the show again, James?
I just wouldn't shut up, would I? I'm sorry.
No, it's been a really good discussion. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been fantastic.
Look, I'm happy to come back again, and I'm sorry for extending the time.
Oh, no, that's right. It's a good discussion. But I think it'd be great to have you back. Yeah, we'll continue.
Cool.
Thank you very much for coming on. Thanks, Nat.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. And let's try and be nice to each other, eh?
Exactly.
Click like and subscribe, whatever, down below, whether it's on my channel or Rob's.
Yep.
Sure.
The more you get this out there, the better. So share, like, subscribe. There's some type of YouTube algorithm, so play into it. Let's get these stories and these discussions out there.
That's right.
Do it, people. Hit that subscribe button.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.